This is the scariest squad in Fortnite. You have Malibuca and Merstach, who won FNCS in Season 1, teaming up with Swizzy and Vanyak, who won FNCS last season. They land at Redline Rig, but because there's only 25 chests here, Malibuca actually lands to the north to claim a little bit more space and give themselves a little bit more loot, something which is very common in almost every single squad meta. The rest of the trio grab a weapon and instantly drop down onto the boss, and immediately all surround her, all just spraying at her head and immediately wiping her out. Now this gives them the Machinist AR, which is by far the best assault rifle in the game, and the Medallion, which charges the holder's shield up to 75 infinitely. So they basically already have infinite shield. Despite being surrounded by cactuses in the area, they just continually drop this Medallion to each other to always recharge themselves up to 75, so they don't waste time running around all of these, and they can actually just spend this time looting and getting materials instead. Whilst looting, they're also using the Nitro Splashes to ensure they can sprint faster, again increasing their efficiency around the drop spot. Their loot leaving here is pretty predictable. They all have assault rifles with one player only using an SMG. They're all carrying pretty much the best shotgun they could find. Then unfortunately not one single player managed to find any of the Nitro Fist, so instead for their mobility they're all carrying Nitro Splashes, and then the rest is just as many heals as possible, prioritizing on using the Flowberry Fizz as much as possible because of course this can heal all 4 teammates at the same time. Once they've left this drop spot, to rotate faster they continually hit the Nitro barrels that are around to give them that increased sprinting speed, especially since you have infinite sprint while this effect is active. And this is actually where their first problem begins. They start to get focused by the team with the mythic bow and infinite ammo. This actually leads to Vanyak getting knocked twice in the same fight, and the entire team pretty much losing all of their shields outside of Merstach. Malibuca uses the ring next to him to disengage because he doesn't have fists to run from here. Swizzy ends up dying, and Merstach, being the only player not losing his shields, makes the great play to drop all the way down to Vanyak to grab the coin which gives his HP back, at the same time picking up a crucial knock onto one of the opponents. It's incredibly difficult to disengage in squads, in particular in this meta, because everyone just chases you with fists, but because Merstach was then able to get an elimination here, this meant that Malibuca and Merstach could escape, allowing them to reboot in Storm and grab a lot of the loot back that they ended up losing in this fight. But whilst Malibuca was grabbing the cards, he actually also was able to pick up the gloves. So whilst Merstach was rebooting 2 players in the Storm, he could sit on top of Mount Olympus and go for extra Storm Surge tags from here. This also deters other players from walking through this area, which actually opens up the rotation for Merstach, Vanyak and Swizzy later on once they get out of Storm. They continue to rotate into the next few zones, but now end up in a really tricky situation. There's a team on top of this hill, a full 4-stack squad, and they have to rotate up into them. If they go left or right around this hill, this team is going to know exactly where they are because of the marker on the map which shows where the medallion holders are, so there's the high likelihood that this team will just continue to spray them, wasting their materials and their health. Basically, they're forced to fight. This is where those Nitro Splashes they picked up in the early game become useful. They use one splash to give all 4 players the effect, and use Fizz to ensure they all have 0 gravity. And all at once, Swizzy, Vanyak and Malibuca all ramp rush up the hill. This makes the opposing team peek and start to spray at them because they're just on ramps, why wouldn't they? Which allows Merstach with the Mythic AR to almost completely 200-0 one of the other players. This then causes them to box up, and with the Nitro Splash speed boost and the 0 gravity effect, Malibuca, Swizzy, Vanyak and Merstach take height in seconds. Now that they have the health advantage and the other team is boxed up in brick, all they need to do is just continually run through their box with Nitro, picking up super free eliminations. Even when Vanyak gets into a sticky situation where he's inside of the box and the other player has an edit, he can just sprint straight out and ends up actually knocking one of the players while doing this. They did lose a ton of shields, but let's be real, it's squads and they can just really use one of the many Flowberry Fizzes they have to get their entire team up to full HP, and of course they still have the medallion as well, which recharges one player's shields at the same time. I'm not gonna lie, this meta sucks, man. This is just awful. Regardless, they got 4 free elims and now got completely refreshed onto their materials as well. Because they also pulled the 6th zone, they've now also pulled an almost completely ideal position, being on height and with 0 players to their south, meaning they're gonna have a completely free rotate if they need to go that way for the next zone. Now they didn't pull this, however there's also a launch pad on this hill which combined with Flowberry Fizz can launch pad them way up into the sky, and from here they can just land in the dead side of the 7th zone in relatively the same spot as the previous zone. Now almost all Victory Cup games are won by the team with the bow because they can so freely take height and then just grief every single player down below them. However, as you may know, they do not have the bow at this point. Very easy to remember since they died to it earlier on. So how they win is quite interesting. They fist into the next zone and ensure they land on low ground, which is directly underneath the bow team, making it impossible for them to hit them. Now, since this tournament, the bow has been removed, but it's still beneficial to be underneath the height team, as this is the team that is more than likely going to squad spray your mats away. From here, they create a ton of space, and then once they see an opponent which is weak and a potential target, all 4 of them stand in the same edit and quad spray. Now, with the high fire rate weapons that are in Chapter 5, it's incredibly difficult to turbo build when you have 4 of the best players in the world all spraying you at once, so they're easily able to get a refresh here. Because the first moving zone pulls away from the entire lobby, everyone's going to have to rotate that distance. So rather than using their fists, because absolutely everyone is going to be using their fists at this point, Swizzy and Vanyak do the exact same thing they did when they double ramp rush and just use 1 nitro splash and a bit of fizz to freely just jump through this rotate. Remember, everyone's up in the sky right now, meaning first moving is completely free for them. So from here, they decide to ramp up and give themselves a lot of space, make a ton of boxes, and this is because now they're second height, they know that the team from height with the bow is going to start focusing them. Now, the bow can't spray at every single one of these 9 boxes at once, so the entire team starts to look through different angles and chops out the team up on height. So the theory here is their gloves are fully charged because they didn't use them on this first moving rotate, so when they spray out the team on height, they can use all of their charges then to be the highest in the lobby and ensure they land on any team's head, guaranteeing them height. However, Malibuca gets beamed whilst the team is falling, and the height team does a good job of re-establishing and building up height on a second area. But because these builds are fresh, they've just been placed, that means they're weak. So Merstach and Swizzy pop a nitro splash, as they could just run through all of these and disconnect them for a second time. However, this isn't necessary, as they just spray them out and basically chop out the entire lobby. And at this point, the bow team up on height has just lost so many materials, it's no longer worth trying to keep it. So this really opens up a free height take for Swizzy, Vanyak, Malibuca, and Merstach. Whilst the opposing team is relatively close, they actually all kind of build their individual heights up there and don't just create one singular tarp, as this means if any of the teams down below shoot them out, they as a team can still maintain height. Now, the one good thing about squads is because you have 4 members on your team and only one of them really needs to play heal off, that means the height team has a massive advantage in terms of disrupting everyone. Here, Vanyak stays up, whereas Malibuca, Merstach, and Swizzy all drop down to try and fight the players down below to disrupt their heals. The way this is done is also so grief, as they all pop a nitro splash, and Swizzy in particular just runs into every player's box. Now, because this has knockback damage, this pushes all of the players back straight into the storm, so even if he himself takes storm damage, it doesn't really matter because he's not the one playing heal off, but all of the opponents just start to drain HP as they get fired into storm. This allows them to win their first game, which nets them $100 each, because this is, of course, a squad victory cup. Now they're in higher elo, and they actually managed to win a second game as well. Now here, whilst going for the bunker, an entire team uses a nitro splash at once and attempts just to run straight into their box with fists and basically wipe them out straight away. But the main mistake they made was the fact that they tried to do this down a ramp. Now, if you don't actually bump into any walls in particular, you don't go through anything. So you can't go through the cones, can't go through the floors. So once Malibuca spots that these guys are doing this, he distances himself because he's been scouting the whole time. And Swizzy, Vanyak, and Merstach down below all just basically play guns out and pumps out and just wait for them to run into their face and pick up the easiest 3 kills of their life as the last guy just runs away. From here, once Loot Island spawns, they use the fizz and another launch pad to land straight on top of it, and they pressure the team up here in a really nice way. Vanyak and Swizzy spray from one side, and whilst this pressure is going down, Malibuca and Merstach wrap around to the opposite side and end up pressuring from this wall. This sheer aggression just basically scares the other team off, and whilst they're running, they are able to pick up a single elim and claim Loot Island. Now, Loot Island has a massive percentage chance to drop gloves, and in this particular chance, it dropped 2 of them with a bunch of extra heals. So if you don't have gloves, you can't just try to claim Island. This random pea in a pod skin also jumped up here. I don't know if he was trying to reboot or something, but he just became the freest kill ever for Merstach, and the emote shows that he wasn't too happy about it, but I don't know what the hell he was doing, to be honest. Now, going into endgame, it's insanely laggy, and Vanyak has a player just land straight in his box and he ends up dying. I'm not sure if this is a server crash or if this is just one of the laggiest games this season, but it looks truly awful and he is knocked. But again, because it's squads, this means that Malibuca, Merstach, and Swizzy can all triple spray and grab the body before it's finished, which allows them to triple res and get him straight back up into the action. And this is one of the main reasons why chemistry and having the same idea and understanding and plays that you're going to make as a team is so useful when it comes to squads, because 3 or 4 players all either fighting, spraying, shooting, pickaxing from the same angle, whatever it may be, is incredibly difficult to counter. In squads, it's also very common for 1 or 2 players to die and the rest of the team still to kind of clutch up for the rest of the game, so ensuring you not only have a full 4 stack, but also that you can do these little picks of 1 or 2 players off of other teams gives you the significant advantage in the lobby. Now, the high team is all the way up on Loot Island, way up into the sky. The retaking it would be difficult, but they do pretty much the exact same thing as they did in the previous game win. They get to the front side, this time using their fists as they can't run this as easily, and then look back up at height. However, this time, because they have the boom bolt, Vanyak can look up and try to spray onto height, while Swizzy, Merstach, and Malibuca can try and look for picks on their lair. Whilst the team's falling, they do look up and try to scout to see if they can take height, but they did re-establish. So Vanyak does the exact same thing and chops them out again. From here, they can all just fizz and try to dash up to try and take height yet again. Unfortunately, Malibuca actually gets hit by one of the bolts from TD, and at the same time as it explodes, he pumps him and just completely 200-0s him out of the sky, leaving them as a trio. From here, Vanyak returns the favor and ends up reviving him in endgame, which, because you can kind of revive, wait, pause, build, and that meter doesn't go down as much, he can actually kind of tarp himself in whilst reviving Malibuca to get him back up into the game. At the same time, Swizzy and Merstach did actually manage to retake height from this as they chopped out the team for a third time once they'd re-established, got a knock, and were now up on height with all 4 players still alive in the game. And this right here is why having all 4 players alive is so important. Now, after this height retake, they are the only full squad still left in the lobby, which means that not only do they have the most materials as they can just fully tarp up on height using way more mats than anyone else, but if anyone looks up at them, they have more firepower to spray back than anyone down below. And it's very unlikely that if you're a solo, duo, or maybe even a trio down below, that you're going to look up and see a full tarp up on height and think, you know what, maybe I can retake that, maybe we're those guys. So by staying a complete squad, it actually prevents a lot of other teams from looking up at you at all. And this is particularly important because the squad that does have the mythic boom bolt, TD's trio, who knocked Malibuca earlier, is looking up at height and trying to spray them out, but they get pressured off of this layer and can no longer look up at height. This also forces Lens, one of the players in this team, to use his white heals early, and if you notice, he has floppers and 6 medkits. However, he's now using those in the storm, and Malibuca up on height has 3 medkits, so you'd think he may be able to win. However, Lens does this far too early, and he's actually going to lose the heal off purely because he was pressured off of that layer. But he leaves his top open in the endgame, and Vanyak is actually able to spot him, so he doesn't even get down to heal off as he's able to wipe him out completely. Now, I actually have videos of how both of these players dominated and won FNCS. If you want to see how Malibuca and Merstach won Season 1, you can click on this video on the left, and if you want to see how Vanyak and Swizzy won Season 2, you can click on this video on the right.